Greetings to everyone, and welcome to the State of the Bird for the second quarter of 2023. This one's subtitled, "Arrested Bird is an Energetic Bird." Or at least we hope so. So, as usual, what is the State of the Bird? It's a presentation to explain what's going on in the project, and it's done so in an interactive way as an interactive event for the community, where the community can, see what's going on and ask questions because the development of Pidgin 3 is taking, oh my god, so long. So, yeah, moving on. We're going to start by looking at what we did in the past 3 months. So first of all, our last State of the Bird was on April 27th, 2023. And our next one's tentatively scheduled for October 19th, 2023. We generally go the third, the tentative schedule is the third Thursday after the quarter started, just to give us some time to wrap stuff up and whatever, right? So that's the idea, that's the plan. Whether or not it happens on the 19th, I don't know, we'll see, right? All right, so we're gonna start off with some basic metrics. So Q2, as you can see, we're down a bit when it comes to contributors, we're down to 3. We don't get so high. I mean, compared to last year we had 8 at this time frame, but it happens, right? We're kind of in a lull right now, the heavy cycle of refactoring and everything, and is what it is. All right, review requests. As you can see, we're real low. I'm gonna address that elephant in the room in a little bit, but as you can see, our pull requests are way down this quarter. Even compared to last quarter, we're 180 less than, or we opened 180 less than we did last quarter. And even last quarter was down a little bit. Q3 of last year was, I don't want to say a statistical anomaly, but we got a lot of stuff done that quarter. So it's not expected to be that way. All right, issues ebb and flow. I've been trying to make sure we're entering more issues, but I've also been bad about it too. So issues for what we're actually doing, so that for those that don't know, on my normal Twitch streams, there's a counter of our progress towards the 3.0 Alpha 1, and that's based purely on our issues. So that's one of the reasons why I'm trying to use it more, but I always forget, which is problematic because we don't see the progress doesn't move, even though it's technically moving, but it goes up, then it goes down, and comes back to where it was, because we don't know the problems we need to solve until we need to solve them. So the issues right now that are tagged as the Alpha 1 are more like the higher level, high scope of things that need to get done, and not all the nitty gritty little details that are part of it. But yeah, all right, commits. Again, also way low, way low. You will, oh no, we did have HASL in the last one too. Again, we're gonna address that in a second here, but everything's down this quarter a lot. So, infrastructure. Email is finally migrated. Many thanks to Richard for his help in seeing this through. We still have basic email service, but everything is just forwarders or bouncers or auto replies, because we're not trying to actually maintain email for people. We do use, so the company Richard works for, which is Wictel, sponsored us with an email accounts so that we can get email out for our infrastructure for like code reviews and issues and discourse and all of that. But the main thing is we're trying to push everybody to discourse for everything. I know a lot of people don't necessarily like that, but I mean, they weren't maintaining the mailing list, so yeah, I was. And it sucked. So the discourse I'm mostly hands off with. I don't have to do much for it. Email was a completely different story. So yeah, but in brighter news, or in other bright news, DigitalOcean has renewed their sponsorship of our infrastructure. That means we have another full year of our infrastructure. Special thanks to DigitalOcean. Be sure to click that banner at the bottom of our webpage. It's now also in our repository and the README as well. And yeah, go give them some love, because they're definitely helping us remain an independent open source project, and that is awesome. I do have a blog post I'm writing to explain more of the things that that sponsorship allows us to do. So keep an eye out for that as well. All right, Pidgin 2, no releases. There's no reason to release anything. There might be one here soon, which actually, yeah, well, we'll get to that in a second. Actually, I don't think I have that in here, but we'll see. There's something else going on in the Pidgin 2 world that's problematic. And we're not going to get that resolved to, oh joy. Okay, well, we'll talk about that in a minute. All right, Pidgin 3, we cleaned up the Finch preferences page. We moved the Pidgin status box. Well, I should say a little bit more on that. We started revamping the preferences and moving them to G settings, but we hadn't done that in Finch yet, and that's what that does there. The Pidgin status box got moved away from GTK combo box. GTK combo box is deprecated in GTK 4.10. So that obviously needed to be accounted for. There's still a lot more to that. We, since the third quarter has started, we've made GTK 4.10 a requirement now, because a lot of the things that are deprecated in GTK 4.10, the replacements didn't come out until GTK 4.10. So we're just kind of making that the requirement, and then that way we don't have to have a bunch of preprocessor crap to determine which version to use and stuff like that. And there's not really a whole lot sense to do that on something that's unreleased, right? To do the supporting older version stuff like that. So yeah. We're also using the gsourcefunc macro more. This just helps avoid compiler warnings and some other stuff. Not a big deal, but it's there. I was kind of grasping for straws for stuff that got done this quarter, to be honest with you. So we fixed some issues when building against muslibc. Muslibc is a C library that's different than the one most everyone uses, which is GNU-libc. Muslibc is used primarily in the Alpine Linux distro. But it's used for other small Linux distros, stuff like that. There's just some weird issues with this. I think it was we needed to define POSIX source version or something like that, which we weren't defining. GCC silently ignores this, where muslc didn't. So I think that was the case. We just had to define that, and that was fine. I don't remember. We did this a while ago. So, yeah. All right. Modernization of Pidgin 3. We added a widget for displaying statuses. So previously in development versions of Pidgin 3 and Pidgin 2 before it, every new time we wanted to display a status, a contact, whether yourself or a remote contact, their status, we just built that by hand every time. Now we have a widget that just does it, which is cool, right? It's going to be consistent everywhere. That's awesome. We ported the demo protocol plugin to the new contact and status APIs. The new contact and status APIs are to help us deal with issues where, so previously everything in libpurple, all of the remote contacts and everything were addressed by a username. And as many of you know, especially since you're here on Twitch, people can change usernames whenever they want. So that doesn't really work well, right? So we wrote this new contact API, which can be keyed on usernames, but it's expecting an ID. So for protocols that don't have an ID, we just usually fudge it by like hashing the username or something. But you know, we can do that on a per protocol basis. But so anyways, the idea is, you know, the new contact API manages everything based on ID, and it does that for every single remote contact you see. That means if we had a Twitch protocol plugin right now, it means everybody here in chat, it would be keeping track of your statuses well, we don't really have the Twitch presence in here. Or no, Twitch doesn't have presence anymore. It would have your ID and your username, and even your chat color if you have a custom chat color, because the contact API covers all of that. And the status API is, the rewrite is because the existing status API, while I'm sure it made sense at one point in time, I never fully grokked it. I've got a pretty good understanding of it now, but I'm still not 100% sure on how it worked or how it was supposed to work. So we rewrote it to be much, much simpler. One of the things that the old status API did is like it created like a template for statuses, because it was trying to it was trying to only show to the user statuses that could be set depending on the aggregate of the protocols you have connected, where we're going to try to avoid that in Pidgin 3, and instead we're just going to let you set what you can, and we'll show you what the status is on that account or something. I don't know how we're going to do that yet, but that way the protocol will be able to decide based on what the user set on how to set things appropriately, and that avoids all the templating stuff and all that stuff, and it just makes it much easier to deal with. So we'll see how that goes. But we're still rolling it out, because it turns out that in a multi-protocol chat client, The way you refer to contacts and their presence or their status is kind of intertwined into everything, and it's taking a very long time to get there. So, yeah. So next up, also related to the status stuff, we created purple saved presence, which is replacing purple saved status. Basically, the rewrite is basically anything that said status is now getting converted to something called presence. But the save presence and the save statuses before it, those are like your the Pidgin users or the libpurple users saved presences, right? So like you want to say away at work or away sleeping or available or whatever, right? Those are what the save presences and save statuses were. So yeah. All right, made purple request field account work like GTK custom filter. GTK 4 has all these custom filter things for working with lists and stuff. And the purple request field account is a way to try to like filter out accounts for the request API. Remember, the request API is like a UI abstraction layer, so like a protocol can present a dialogue that'll be filled out, or that'll have specific fields in it, and one of them is an account, and that account can be filterable. So like if you only want to like allow, like, so say you have a plugin that's doing something on XMPP specifically, you want to filter out any non-XMPP accounts from this request dialog, and that's what this whole piece is about there. So yeah. Next up, we added purple account connected and purple account disconnected signals for the accounts. Traditionally, this worked on the connection subsystem. We're trying to kind of avoid that API. We're kind of trying to make it drift away or slip away into the background, because like a lot of the times you'd end up either having a connection or an account and you'd have to go the other way. We're trying to get everything just to the account, and then you can figure out if the account is connected, or if the account is connected, it'll have a connection. If it's not, it won't. And then that way it feels like it's easier to keep track of the API that way, rather than having to bounce back and forth between, is this an account API or a connection API, and going that way, right? It sucks. It's annoying. So we're trying to get around that. And then finally, we ported the Bonjour protocol plugin to the new contact and status APIs. We're doing these in tandem because the status API is directly tied to your remote contacts as well. And trying to change one while not the other makes things very difficult. That said, changing both of them at the same time, it leads to big pull requests. So we're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. So we just, instead of having two medium to large pull requests, we're going for one large. Right? Because if we just did one, well, if we did it as two separate ones, we'd have one where we would, I'm not even sure how we'd work the old status into the contact stuff, but moving the existing stuff from the or moving the status API to the presence API might be possible, but it's weird for a lot of reasons. But all the new status API depends on the contact API, so it's just easier to do everything all at once. We'll just get there and go. All right. Next up, for GPlugin, we released GPlugin 0.41.0 on June 22nd. This fixed a leak in the settings list in the GTK UI, I believe. We also created GPlugin introspection, not to be confused with GObject introspection, but this allows introspection for plugins. So this is a problem we've had for a while, and we weren't sure how we were going to solve it. And then I got the magic idea that we can just make, so GObject introspection, you can give it an executable to run to get all your types and everything loaded. So GPlugin introspection gives you a static library that you just call a function in, which it's not a static it is a static library. It is a static library that you link into a custom executable where you can define and initialize whatever you need to in your program. And then it will go ahead and load those plugins using the native plugin loader, which will then have all the types and everything registered correctly for GObject introspection to actually run and find those types. So it's a little confusing, especially if you don't follow C memory stuff very well, especially when it comes to plugins, but it works, and that's all you need to know. The big push for that was, so as we're building the IRC-v3 protocol plugin, we're trying to make it as extendable as possible because I want to use it as the basis of the Twitch protocol plugin. So I need to get header files and stuff like that all sorted, but we should also, or people should also be able to write plugins in other languages, which is where all the introspection stuff comes from. So it's a little from column A, a little from column B there. But the biggest thing is I'm building the Twitch protocol plugin on top of it. I haven't started that part yet, but that's the plan. But I wanted to have documentation for it. And we needed the GPlugin introspection to create a GRR file so we can use GI-docgen to create the docs. I don't think we created the docs yet. I think that fell off my to-do list and I need to edit back on, but we'll get into that soon. While we were doing all that, I also found a bunch of oddities in the native loader. And that's because the native loader is something like 12 years old at this point, and I hadn't reviewed the code in a while. And in those 12 years, there's been better ways to do things, stuff like that. So we went ahead and cleaned all of those up as well. So things should be better. There's better error reporting. The code is easier to follow. Yada yada yada. You know the drill. All right, Talkatu, we didn't release anything yet, but we did fix the warnings that came up with GTK 4.10. So we should probably kick that release out here soon. I think we just updated Pidgin to go to that revision instead of going to a release, but we'll see. Again, Talkatu's future is still questionable. We don't know if we're going to keep it as a separate library or if we're going to merge everything in. The idea for Talkatu was to make it a standalone library that other chat clients could use, because writing chat widgets kind of sucks because there's lots of weird things you need to do to make them work right. But as we're finding out, trying to do that in an abstract way so that other people can use it is making things much more difficult. So again, that stuff might get pulled in. But we probably won't know until we're through at least the contact and the status API rewrites, because we're not going to be getting to the chat window stuff until that stuff's mainly done, or mostly done, I should say. So libgnt, that's the end cursors toolkit that Finch uses. We didn't do anything on it. We haven't done a whole lot of Finch on Finch in general. But yeah, nothing's changed there. So, you know, same old, same old. Traversity. Traversity is our network traversal library. Still a work in progress. libpurple doesn't use it yet. We haven't had a need to build it up further, but we'll get to it at some point. The point of this library is there's lots of NAT traversal libraries out there. All of them are specific to one NAT traversal technology, and none of them have a common API to use all of them. Traversity's intent is to fix all that, right? So like as Pidgin as a piece of software, when you as a Pidgin user want to send a file peer-to-peer to a friend, right? Pidgin itself as a client doesn't care if we're using UPnP, NatPnP, PCP, stun, or whatever, right? It needs one of them to work, right? And previously in Pidgin 2 and earlier, it would go through and try each one of those until it found one that worked or didn't work, and then fall back to something else, right? The point of Traversity is to take all that code that is sucky and really sucks to write and is gross and has all this platform specific stuff, but the idea is to take all that and put it into a library that, again, multiple people, multiple different clients can use, that which means, you know, it becomes its own project, its own community, and then everybody gets better NAT traversal support because we have one library that's well supported and being updated and used by multiple projects and stuff, right? Rather than everybody writing their own custom solution, which has its own quirks. So yeah. If anybody has a question that you would actually like me to answer at the end of this presentation, as it says below the presentation window here, you can type !, ask, and then we will address questions then. All right, HASL. HASL, for those of you who don't know, is our HASL-free authentication and security layer library. That's a pun on SASL, the simple and secure simple authentication and security layer specification. The existing SASL libraries have problems for a number of reasons. And I don't think I actually put this in here, and I'm looking at the date and realizing there's a bigger problem here. But so Pidgin 2 and earlier had support for Cyrus SASL. Well, let me get through this and we'll get to that problem. So we released HASL 0.1.0 on June 28th. It has support for the plain and external mechanisms. We don't really do anything with the external mechanisms, but you can turn it on and go from there. But the point of HASL is, again, just like Traversity and Talkatu, is HASL libraries typically have the client and server parts in them. We as a client don't care about the server parts. We want a simple and easy to use client. The existing solutions are not easy and simple to use. So we wrote HASL for those reasons. Now, we released 0.1.0 already, even though Pidgin 3 is still, a long way out, because it turns out we have a license conflict with Cyrus HASL. Cyrus HASL is kind of a nightmare when it comes to licensing, and basically what it boils down to is, in its current incarnation, it's not GPL compatible. So, looking at the date, and knowing that our Debian packager is not available right now for reasons I'm not going to get into during this presentation, Pidgin's actually scheduled to get removed from Debian testing tomorrow due to this license conflict. And that date just kind of slipped away from me. So if you're on Debian Unstable, you're going to lose Pidgin probably tomorrow. We released HASL to combat this, because the intent was, if we don't get the licensing stuff sorted out with Cyrus, we can port Pidgin 2 to HASL. We haven't done that part yet, and I don't think the ticket's been resolved because I haven't seen an email for it. So yeah, I don't know what time the bot on Debian's going to come through and kick that out, but it's technically the 28th in UTC now. So yeah, that's a problem we have to deal with. But we'll see what happens there. All right, setbacks for this quarter, the fun stuff. I needed time off this quarter. Anybody who had been on my streams and stuff like that in June, or actually no, in May, would have seen me slowly, or maybe quickly, I don't know, losing any semblance of patience. I was losing it on everybody for everything because I quite frankly was stressed. Now that is not an excuse. There's no excuse for that, right? I should be doing better than that. I should not be blowing up on people for stupid things. That's totally on me. That's my fault, right? So I took some time off. That time I took off was essentially May and June. I kind of linked away a little bit in May, and then it just kind of continued for over a month and then to 2 months. So what ended up happening, I was super stressed out. I had multiple clients for contracts. All of it was stressed out. I didn't have good planning on any of the projects. My time management therefore suffered from it because there was no timing. I was doing some hardcore reverse engineering stuff, which is drains your patience as well, right? Because you can only bang your head against the desk so many times before it starts hurting or you start bleeding, right? And that's what I was doing with that reverse engineer contract. It was every day, where are you, what's your timeline? I'm like, I don't know. I've tried this and this, I don't know, right? And just cycles for days, right? So you get stressed out by it. And that's what led to me being stressed, losing patience, stuff like that. So so something had to break, something had to give. So unfortunately that was Pidgin, right? So I finished up that contract. The funny part is, after all that stress and frustration, I one day go and get new captures and see an endpoint that's new. And I went from having no idea when I'm going to finish this project and having to write a buttload of code for it to being done in about 5 hours. Because the new endpoint worked the way that everything on the old stuff did. So all I had to do was point everything to the new endpoint and I was done. Which is ridiculous, but that's reverse engineering. Anybody who's done reverse engineering can know that when you hit a breakthrough, that breakthrough can be everything or it can just be the next step, right? Or maybe it puts you a step back too, who knows? But anyways, so I got that contract done. The other big problem was my finances were an absolute mess. I didn't know how I was going to eat for the next month, right? Pay my bills, didn't know. All that's now taken care of, right? I am in a much better place financially as well as mentally, which is very good. However, the project hasn't quite recovered yet from me being away for basically 2 months, right? That's why, as we saw earlier, all the metrics are down, and they're down a lot. That's to be expected. I was hoping they wouldn't get that low, but I knew when I stepped away, being the driving force, it would happen, right? So it is what it is, but you know, now we just got to deal and go with it from there. So yeah. All right. Next steps. Actually, we grab water here. So the next steps for the project. These are things we'll be working on between now and the next State of the Bird. We're going to finish adding new functionality to the new contact list. So we have a new contact list. It's got searching in it. It can open conversations. I think we're going to put more... yeah, we got to get groups in there somehow and other stuff like that. Groups are just going to be tags. We're going to figure out how that's going to work. And I think this includes like filtering and searching, stuff like that. I don't remember. Like this has been on here for a while. So yeah, we're hopefully going to finish migrating to the new contact API. As I mentioned earlier, the new contact API is a big blocker for everything. We need it just so we can reference remote users. So yeah. Then once everything is migrated to the new contact API, which hopefully we'll have done by the next State of the Bird, but we'll see. We're going to completely remove the old buddy list API. All of it's going to be gone. So purple buddy will be no more, purple group no more, purple meta contact will be gone, purple B list will be gone. There's more stuff in there too, but all that will be gone. And yeah, the problem is that stuff gets into all sorts of other stuff, and we're probably not going to be able to delete it by the next State of the Bird, but we'll see. We're also going to be finishing converting to the new status API. As we mentioned earlier, the status API is the old status API is super complicated, so we simplified it. So we need to finish converting to it. After that, we need to integrate into, or we need to finish integrating the history API as well. And then maybe Alpha 1. Who knows? All right, time for questions. Oh, you know what? I guess we skipped the demo. Did I turn the, okay, apparently I turned the demo off. There's not really anything new to demo, so we're gonna skip that for now. So the questions, we gotta jump over here. Right now we only have one question in the queue, so if you have any questions, by all means, now would be the time to do it, or time to ask it. So our first question is, what is your funding status on Pidgin? There's none. Pidgin has never been funded. So Pidgin falls under the legal umbrella of a nonprofit organization called Instant Messaging Freedom, which is ran by, or the board of directors is all former Pidgin and ADM developers or people involved with the project, including myself. I'm currently the secretary of the secretary of the nonprofit. But the nonprofit does have some money, not a whole lot of money, but the intent of that money is, the intent of the nonprofit is to be a legal entity or legal umbrella for the project, right? As many of you know, previously we had some issues with a certain chat company, and they sued the lead developers a number of times. Because that's who they could target in the open source projects, right? So the nonprofit exists so that the lead developers don't get targeted. So we do have some money there, but the money is meant to handle legal issues. And, you know, to pay for lawyers and stuff like that, pay for domains, stuff like that. But when it comes to actual development of the project, there's no funding. There's never been any funding. I've gotten a personal grant once to work on Pidgin, but that was granted to me directly, not to the project, not to be like spent on like doing things for the project itself, right? So basically, we're unfunded for all intents and purposes, right? So like I personally have a Patreon. People can subscribe to me and stuff like that here on my Twitch channel, and stuff like that. There's also we have, that's not it. Oh, maybe it's donate. We also have a page on the I Am Freedom website that will describe more ways that people can donate. Well, that's not the right link either. And it explains more about how you can donate to the foundation, or to the nonprofit and stuff like that as well. We do have a bunch of options available for like corporations, stuff like that, who might want to do bigger donations or something, but we just ask that you reach out to us and we'll go from there to figure it out. But yeah, aside from that, we're just unfunded, right? People work on Pidgin when they can, which is why I burnt out so hard on the project, right? Because I was so right now I pay my bills by doing independent contracting for other companies, right? Which I purposely do that because that leaves me ample time to work on Pidgin, right? So, you know, obviously I've got other responsibilities, taking care of my pets, housework, stuff like that, right? By doing independent contracting, I can I can limit how many hours I'm spending there, so I can take care of everything else and everything around the house, and so that I can maintain Pidgin, right? If I wasn't doing that, if I was working full time, I wouldn't be able to maintain Pidgin because it just, there's too much work, right? If we were funded, that'd be cool, but yeah. It's all right. Hopefully that answered your question. It probably went way overboard, but yeah. All right, so next question here is, how hard is it for new devs to get involved in Pidgin development? That depends on what you mean by new devs. Do you mean brand new developers just out of school, or do you mean developers that are just new to Pidgin? You don't have to answer. I'll respond to both. QLogic here in chat just said less than it used to be, and that's very true. So our development process is getting better, but it is still kind of a nightmare. But it's the development process is what you would expect of a C-based application. And what I mean by that is the developers have to directly interact with a build system. They need to have development packages installed on their machines. They need to have a good understanding of how the libraries we're using in the project work, stuff like that, right? Our documentation's gotten better. By the time we get to the alpha, or maybe shortly after the alpha, I'm intending to get... So right now our documentation is mostly just API reference. There's not really any documentation that says like how to go about building something in particular, right? So like historically, like our plugin tutorials have been like how to write a hello world plugin, which like, okay, great. But what about after that, right? It's like, oh, here's the bare minimum of writing a plugin, and when it gets loaded, it shows a dialog that says hello world. Great. How do I do something when somebody says a command in chat or something, right? Maybe you want to write a simple bot or something that responds, right? We have no documentation, no examples for that, right? And the intent is to get that stuff figured out and fixed and go from there. So like if you're familiar with C development stuff, it's specifically with glib and GTK, you'll do all right. If you're not, but you know C, picking up glib and GTK isn't too bad, but it's going to be a learning curve. If you're a brand new dev, I hate to say this, but I'd say now's not the time. It'll be easier soon, TM. One of the big differences in Pidgin 3 versus Pidgin 2 is the plugin loaders. The plugin loaders support, I'm going to say this is going to make people angry. The plugin loader supports modern languages like Lua and Python, whereas in Pidgin 2 and earlier, we supported TCL and Perl, or TCL, sometimes called Tickle. And if you've never heard of Tickle, I don't blame you. And if you're like Perl, yeah. Perl was real big for a while, but most people don't write Perl anymore. And I'm not judging. That's just, the way it goes. Whereas a lot of people write Python, and Lua's kind of coming back, being, bigger, stuff like that. So like a newer dev could start writing, or a new dev could start writing plugins in those languages. And due to geometric introspection, that's what we use to get language bindings for other languages. You'd end up using the C-like API, but you wouldn't actually have to deal with any of the problems in the C code, where, you wouldn't be doing your own manual memory management, because that's all taken care of by your runtime. And you don't have to deal with the build system, stuff like that, right? So you could start learning the Pidgin code base and even the basics of its C API without actually writing C code. So that would be a good way to get people in. And then, then they just kind of have to pick up C, which C is not really a hard language. I don't care what people say. The language itself is very minimal, so it's easy to pick up. So yeah, that's kind of where we are right now. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of room for plugins, because we are still overhauling all of the old APIs. So yeah. All right. Next up, hopefully I answered that. If you have any follow-up questions, by all means, feel free to ask the follow-up question too. All right, next question. Would I ever sell Pidgin? For example, if Meta offered you $2 billion, would you accept? I can't. You're probably like, huh? So I'll tell you this. So in modern times, there's these things called CLAs, or contributor license agreements, where people will assign their copyrights to the project or to the company that's maintaining the project. Pidgin predates those. So all the code from all of our contributors are still copyright, or are still, all of the contributions from our previous contributors remain this, they're only copyrightable by the person that wrote it, right? There was no reassignment of copyright. Now, while developer certificate of origins might have worked as well, we didn't know about them at the time. We didn't use them either. So as the question of who owns Pidgin, the answer is everyone. Like, we can't do anything. I will mention too, we did have this discussion for an upcoming episode of Linux Downtime, so keep an ear out for that one, talking about DCOs and CLAs. But basically what this amounts to is Pidgin will forever be on the GNU General Public License version 2, because we can't move. We can't even grant exceptions to the license, because we can't, to grant an exception to the license, or to remove, or to switch to another license, we have to get everybody who has copywritten work in the programs okay. And I'm not 100% certain, but I'm very confident that at least one of those contributors has passed on from this world. And we also have copyrights from companies that are no longer in business. And if you've ever dealt with a merger and acquisition, you'll know how messy all of that gets. So, for example, I mean, it doesn't matter, it's public knowledge. One of the copyright holders on some of the Pidgin code is Sun Microsystems. I'm very confident I'm not going to get the okay from Oracle, who owns all of Sun stuff now, to say that they're okay with us changing the license, right? They'll just be like, oh, what is this? I don't care. Like, we're not responding to you. Like, right? It's just not going to happen, right? So this is also an issue for things like the Apple iOS, actually the Apple app stores, right? Both the Mac store and the iOS store. Both of them have a term in there that is not compatible with the GPL as well, that says that I'm going to paraphrase because I don't remember it. I don't have it in front of me, but the term is something like, you can only distribute your software from the iOS store or whatever. And that's the problem with the GPL. That's not compatible with the GPL. Since we can't grant an exemption to it, most open source projects that end up in the iOS or Mac app stores, they will grant an exception to that. But again, we can't grant an exception because we can't get everyone's okay. But more to the point of the iOS stores or to the Apple Store stuff is there's also a provision in there about you must have explicit access to reach any network you're trying to connect to. And yeah, we don't have that, right? Pretty sure Google doesn't want us connecting to their Google Chat network, as well as Discord and whoever else you want to pick, right? Slack. At some point, I hope to get iMessage support working, stuff like that. And they're not going to give us the okay to connect to their network, which will then also, will be against their terms of service for their stores. So therefore, we're not going to spend our time porting everything to work there. Because what's the point, right? It's not going to get accepted. So, all right. If you want to ask a question, you have to type !ask and then your question. All right, next up. So existing plugins work with Pidgin 3? No. Or will they have to be rewritten? Not necessarily rewritten, but definitely heavily refactored. You're looking for a good XMPP client that has native Omeo, and you really like the look and feel of Pidgin. Well, Pidgin 3 doesn't look like Pidgin 2 anymore. And we're intending to have Omeo built in, so maybe that works for you. There is some rudimentary work that I did to make a GPlugin plugin loader that would do a whole bunch of memory shenanigans to load Pidgin 2 plugins into Pidgin 3 and basically make it work. I got as far as querying plugins, and I mean, it works, but it's a nightmare, and I don't recommend anybody continues on it, and I definitely won't be either. But one of the other things, we didn't talk about it here yet, in the State of the Bird, one of the things we decided this past quarter as well, and I probably should put this in somewhere. So in our main source tree, we have, for default protocols that we have in the code base, we have Bonjour, IRC, Gadu Gadu, XMPP, the demo. I feel like I'm missing one. But anyways, of those, both Bonjour and XMPP use XMPP, right? Bonjour is built on top of XMPP, at least the RFC. But the way it's implemented in Pidgin 2 is we have two XMPP parsers and serializers to send data out across an XMPP. So to avoid code duplication like we have right now, we were talking about creating a sub-library to handle all of the XMPP stuff. But aside from, so traditionally most XMPP libraries, what they'll end up doing is they will give you like an XML DOM, a document object model, for you to work on the XMPP stuff in memory. And that's okay, but it leaves a bit to be desired, and it means you really need to know the XMPP specs well enough to know like which elements and attributes and stuff like that are supposed to be there. And that kind of sucks, right? So the idea came up of, well, if we have to write this library, why don't we make it out of tree, right? So that other projects can benefit from it as well, right? Because again, one of the big things as an open source project is community building. And like, it's great that, we could have a bunch of people working on our XMPP library, but it would be a better thing if we had a separate library that even more people could work on, and we can, not control, what's the word? We could benefit from that as well by just using that, and then that library can kind of live its own way, and we can just integrate it into things the way we need to. So right now we have this project codenamed Dodo, which is actually a high-level XMPP parser. It doesn't really work yet. We're still working on it. We're still getting there. But the intent is, instead of like giving you an XML DOM, it'll give you an XMPP message, which could have a body, which could have another XMPP message, which is something you'll see in carbons and stuff like that. But the intent is to get to basically bolster everybody that's using XMPP could use this library and do so in a high-level way that has most of the ZEPs already implemented, right? For Bonjour, I don't know that Bonjour can do Omeo. I wouldn't see why it couldn't. Not that I'm real familiar with that ZEP, but but that way, right? Like, so previously, if we wanted to implement Omeo in Pidgin, we would implement it on the XMPP protocol plugin, and then also implement it on the Bonjour protocol plugin, and that sucks, right? Because now you're doing that same work twice, blah blah blah, right? So the idea of the library is we put it all into the library. Maybe there's some feature flags or some API that allows you to turn on Omeo, turn off Carbon, something like that, right? Like Bonjour wouldn't need MAM, so Bonjour would be like, yeah, give me this, but don't turn on MAM, right? We haven't gotten that far to figure that out. Right now, this library is still mostly a proof of concept. And we're not sure that even the XML parsers we're trying to use are going to do things the way that we want them to. But, we'll find out when we get there, right? So, yeah. But, yeah, so that's pretty much it. But, yeah, the intent is, like, the way Pidgin 2 is right now with separate plugins for MAM, that's message archive management, that's chat history in when you join a muck, stuff like that. Actually, I think that's on DMs too, but maybe not. But Omeo as well as Carbons, none of those should be plugins, right? It's cool that they're able to be plugins, but they should be in the core library, right? And even if they were plugins, they should be in the core distribution, right? Because these are all things users are going to want. And one of the things we're trying to do in general with Pidgin 3 is we're trying to give a better user experience right away, right? A good example of this is, so we rewrote the IRC protocol plugin. It's not finished yet, like most things. We're trying to get there. Just bear with us. But so the IRC protocol plugin, we deleted the old one already now too, but the new one is all IRC v3 capable. It is set up, it very clearly has a different states of the connection. So an IRC connection has a registration phase and then a post-registration phase. Like when you join channels, you send messages, all that, that's all post-registration. But there are some things that happen on IRC that have to be done during registration. And the IRC v3 protocol plugin will tell you exactly when it goes from registration to post-registration. It'll tell you when things are started. So plugins can negotiate additional capabilities, stuff like that, all that, it's awesome. But the bigger thing I want to mention here is what you'll end up seeing when you use IRC a lot, especially like Libero is really good about this. So Libero Chat has documentation on how to connect to their network using HASL for a lot of clients. Now, remember we talked about HASL earlier. The implementation of HASL doesn't really matter here, but like the documentation for Pidgin 3 for Libero Chat is literally going to be click the checkbox that says use HASL authentication. That's it. Actually, no, sorry, it's not even that. It's not even that. HASL is on by default. You have to click the button that says remember password, or no, require password. So IRC optionally has an optional password when you connect, right? So we there's other protocols that have this too. XMPP is another one of them. So we don't know if we should be looking up your password in your password manager or something, right? So on those accounts, so you can check a box that'll say require password, and that'll be it. Right? It'll be a little bit more tricky than that for your first account or your first connection, because your first connection to Libero, when you have to go and register and create your HASL stuff and all that, you'll have to connect without requiring password, and then create your account in Nixserve, blah blah blah, and then you can go back and say require password, and then Pidgin will prompt you for it, and then it'll automatically use HASL. But the more important thing there is the default options for the IRC v3 protocol plugin right now are to use Libero. They are to do it with a TLS connection. It's set up to require to only do the plain HASL method over TLS. It'll also, if you don't put in a HASL authentication name and you connect with HASL correctly, it'll set the HASL authentication name to your NIC for that connection. That's another problem that a lot of people have run into, and it's a really stupid one to debug, and it's really easy to solve, right? So somebody connects, they verify they log in with their HASL, right? They lose their connection or something, so their client reconnects, but the old connection's still there, hasn't timed out yet, so they end up connecting with their alternative NIC, right? Grim1 instead of Grim, right? And then they fail authentication because it tries to use Grim1 as a SASL authentication name because they didn't manually set that. But because the previous login was successful and Pidgin used that as a trigger to say this is a SASL authentication name, I will set it for the user. Or I'll take, the default, or the value was blank. The user successfully authenticated. I'm going to store this name because we know it worked. Now when their nick gets changed and they reconnect, it'll be fine because it'll still authenticate as their other nick, or as the nick that's on the account, and everything will be fine. But these are some of the steps we're trying to do to make things better for users, right? Because some of the stuff sucks. Oh no, why did nobody tell me? I just noticed the presentation wasn't actually showing in OBS. Sorry. Or the questions weren't. Lovely. I think I did this last time too. They're supposed to show up on screen. Well, too late for that. We're not going to go back and re-edit that in. So yeah. All right. Well, that is the last question, unless anybody else has one here. I guess we can go do a quick demo. I skipped it out of the presentation for now. But here's Pidgin 3. Most of you will probably see it like this. A lot of this is going to change yet. We've still got a long way to go. But the idea is we are now a single window application. We're not a single window. The intent is you'll still be able to pull conversations out. We haven't done that part yet. Blah blah blah. Oh shit! Thank you. Okay. So the intent is that your contact list and your conversations and everything will all end up in the same place, right? Because I don't know about you, but like in Pidgin 2, when you get like a friend request and like you got to go find the buddy list window to go do stuff, that's really annoying, right? So here in Pidgin 3, our contact list shows up here, right on the main window. Then our conversations are here, right? When you send a message to a friend or join a chat, it'll show up here, right? So some of the logos and stuff, these are mostly placeholders. We'll figure it out, right? There's also a thing for notifications here. We'll get to that in a second, right? But let's say I want to go message our Echo bot, right? So I just double clicked on the contact list. It pops up here. We need to make this automatically selected thing. Again, little steps. We're getting there, right? The Echo bot just echoes what it says. So you say, hello, how are you, right? And it just literally says what you said. Maybe we should tap some AI into this and make it more smart. I don't know. But yeah, so a lot of the chat stuff's going to change a little bit. You'll notice this is a list widget. This is not a text box, so you cannot copy paste, or you cannot copy straight out of here. We'll figure something out for that in the long term. We were trying to avoid using this widget because of that reason. But it's really hard to do it with that widget. So we ended up going this way. And we'll figure out where we end up with that. But like I said, the chat message stuff, this stuff, like it works right now. We're not going to like do anything major with it until we get much further down the line when we finish the contact API rewrite and the status API rewrite. But one of the other nice things about Pidgin 2 or Pidgin 3 here is, well, let's do this. We're going to do a temporary connection failure. And we're just gonna, all right, so right here, you're gonna see Grim, because, I'm Grim. So I just pruned your connection, but hey, look at that. We got to get the notification things in here too. But now you actually get a notification here. That'll show you when stuff disconnected and all that. And if we wait, it'll reconnect. Otherwise, we can just hit reconnect here and we're back online, right? But also interesting along those lines are when you get someone wants to add you to the list, it's going to pop up here as well, right? Again, we got to get the notification numbers on here, but we're getting there. We've got to overhaul this widget and some other stuff. And libadwada is doing some changes, stuff like that. So we'll see. But the same messages that were here. So Alice added you to contact. You can hit message. It'll open a conversation to Alice. I thought this was supposed to auto select. I got to look at that, right? That should be an easy fix. So there's a message to Alice. We're good to go. There's not currently a way to close a conversation, is there? Oh no, it does work. Okay. That's the state of the UI right now. I don't remember what works and what doesn't. So we can just close that guy. But we don't have it in here. But yeah, so you can see I'm using the demo protocol plugin. The demo protocol plugin, this started as an idea that people complain all the time that we don't have screenshots of the application. I understand. I get it, right? The problem is there was never a good way to get good sanitized data for screenshots, right? And even if you did, or so even if you went ahead and manually did it, that means you would have to go and sanitize it and everything the whole time, right? Because like people don't, like random people I'm talking to don't want me to show what their, you know, their XMPP handle is or a conversation or something like that, right? So the idea of the demo protocol plugin was to give us that static data that we can always use and is always good, right? And then that built into, well, we can just use this to trigger all sorts of other stuff too and to test stuff, right? So like the notifications, like testing a connection failure notification was a pain before, right? Like, what did you do? Like, oh, okay, so let me connect my XMPP account and then let me set up an IP tables rule to drop all the packets from it, and now let's wait for it to time out, right? No, like, yeah, that's what we did back in the day, and now it's like, yeah, now we just have a demo protocol plugin where the protocol plugin will just kill its own connection in a couple seconds and we get to test the notifications, right? And then I can test it again, right? So contacts are empty. Come here, hit reconnect. Now it reconnected, voila, we're back, right? So the demo protocol plugin's built into, or grown into a whole lot more. We're also having a plan. We also have an idea of a plan for first starts for users, or like when a user first starts a program, to use a demo protocol plugin to actually like show them how things work, right? Because no matter how intuitive you try to make a chat client, especially a multi-protocol one or a universal chat client, people are going to get confused, they're going to get lost, right? So by having like an interactive tour thing, that'll make things real easy. So we're getting there. The UI is still here. The buddies menu, this is probably going to get chopped up. So is the conversation one. This is just remnants of the old stuff that's not completely reworked yet, right? Again, we've got to do all this libpurple stuff before we can do this stuff. So like say, for example, the account manager, this is a little crowded, a little clunky right now. We understand, right? But again, we're not really focused on the UI. We're trying to get all the stuff in the core up and ready so that we can just go run ahead with the UI and get everything there, right? But so like if we want to go edit the account, like this button shouldn't be here anymore, and it's not clear that this is the save button, right? We'll get there, right? But you know, here's the account editor before that used to be a tabbed interface. Now it's just a scroll list, right? But like I was saying with the IRCv3 protocol, why does... Oh, okay, that's a bug. We have to fix that. So, oh, Bonjour is the one I was reading. Oh, I said that before, right? So if you select an IRCv3 protocol account, right? Look at you put in your username of foo, right? We're not actually going to connect this, but everything's set up for Libera itself, right? By default, the required password is not turned on, but if you look at the advanced options, it's going to use TLS by default using the TLS port. It's not going to set a server password, ident name, real name, or SASL login name, or SASL mechanism. This is so that you can decide which SASL mechanisms to use. This is advanced options, right? If you don't know what it is, it's okay. If you want to know, I can tell it, right? But by default, it won't do plain text SASL auth over unencrypted connections, stuff like that, right? And then stuff for the rate limiter, right? But like by default, you put in your name, you hit go, you have a secure connection to Libera, which is not the way this used to work in Pidgin 2. There's a plan at some point, it's probably be after the alpha, that you won't deal, like when you create a new account, you won't get the account editor. You'll instead get like an account wizard or something. And the intent is that instead of selecting a protocol, because a lot of users don't know what a protocol is, right? They hear protocol and they're like, what the hell is that, right? A lot of end users, right? Because we got to realize that the Pidgin user base, while a lot of it is power users, there's also people that just use it as an IRC client, right? That's fine. Or maybe they want to connect to Messenger or something too, right? So one of the things we're trying to do is we want to make sure that it's easy for people to find stuff and get to it. So what we want to do is we want to have the protocols be able to provide a list of networks right? Because people understand a chat network better, right? Or chat service, right? Something like that. So like the IRC-v3 protocol plugin could provide a Libera, it could provide an OFTC, a Ryzen, FNAT, etc., right? But it could then also allow you to do a custom one, which take you back to this screen, right? But the idea is that with the other one, it'll set up everything else the way it needs to be, right? So like, oh, okay, this IRC server only listens on these ports and requires TLS, right? And it can just, you know, go ahead and toggle all that stuff, right? And then when you're talking about stuff like, say, Google Chat or Facebook Messenger or something like that, they'd only provide one network / service, and then everything would just work, kind of thing. But yeah, so all right, then real quick, the preference window looks a lot different too. This might get tweaked a little bit more too. We're also trying to get rid of as many preferences as possible, just trying to use more sane defaults, stuff like that too, right? But we also had preferences for all sorts of crazy stuff. The network stuff here, some of this will stay, some of it won't. A lot of this is going to get pushed off to Traversity, and we'll figure out how we're going to deal with that when we get there. Proxy stuff is all still the same. You can, you know, set all your proxy stuff, whatever. Status idle stuff, this is going to be changing because of the status rewrite. One of the big new things in Pidgin 3 is the credential providers, aka your password managers. Right, so right now, out of the box, we support K-Wallet and libsecret on Unix machines, or on POSIX machines. On Mac OS, we do integrate with keychain access. And on Windows, we do integrate with WinCred. And this is fully pluggable, so you could write a plugin for Bitwarden or 1Password or MyPass, whatever, you know, pick a password manager. So people can write their own for these and then, you know, make them available, and we'll be good to go. Statuses window looks the same right now. It's just GTK4 stuff. Plugin window looks a bit differently. We are allowing you to disable the protocol plugins now. Like you, actually. Okay, that did unload. Okay, we need to work on that. That's a bug, kind of. But yeah, just to cycle stuff out and stuff, yeah. But like, so you know, this drops over another list window to show you more information about this. GPlugin gives you a bunch more info, stuff like that. Where's oh, this just less protocols, lovely. libsecret doesn't have any options. What's something that has options? Idlemaker doesn't. Bonjour, auto accept, sure. So auto accept, when you enable it, we get the settings down here, right? So I don't know what new dir, notify, and escape mean. There's some stuff we have to do to make the get the better description stuff out of here, but that's not quite there yet. But so like auto accept file transfers, you can set the path to here, and if it's a stranger, it'll ask instead of doing it. A stranger means they're not on your contact list, right? But yeah, so this stuff's all here. That's all still pretty familiar. The UI's obviously changed. So Pidgin 2 is GTK2, Pidgin 3 is GTK4. But yeah, so we're slowly getting there. Slowly getting there. But yeah, that's basically it. That's not what I wanted. All right, and I see we had a new question come in too. So let's jump to that. And, oh no, I thought we had a new question. Oh yeah, sorry. If you want to re-ask your question, I can get it up on the screen, but otherwise I will respond to it. Will it support mainly trusting TLS certs that aren't from a CA? One of the IRC servers you use is using a self-signed TLS cert. The plan is definitely to have that. We do have the certificate manager in Pidgin 2, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to push people to, one of the reasons the certificate manager exists in Pidgin 2 is because we don't integrate with the system CA store, right? One of the things we're trying to do with Pidgin 3 is we're trying to integrate with the system CA store so that we don't need to add our own custom widgets and own custom ways to manage stuff, right? So we're using GIO's everything, and they depend on GNU TLS. So I'm not exactly sure on the specifics of how that works, but basically you would integrate it into wherever GNU TLS's store is, which might just be on a Unix machine, Etsy, SSL, certificates, I think it is. Right? I'd have to look, it's been a while. And then it should just work, right? And then it'd be there, be happy, be good to go. Because again, like I should explain, one of the reasons why we ended up with our own cert manager and managing certs and everything is because when the Pidgin and game before it was so far ahead of everything else support wise, that we oftentimes had to build these things for ourselves. A great example of this is how we work on Windows in general. So for anybody that's ever done any network programming in C or C++ or even I think C# too, but maybe not. C# probably has examples around it. You have BSD sockets and then you have WinSock. They are not compatible in any way, shape, or form. And the way this is implemented in Pidgin 2 and earlier, and there's still remnants of it in Pidgin 3, I think, but we've gotten rid of most of it, I believe, if not all of it. Basically, there was a whole bunch of hackery done so that there was a whole bunch of hackery done so that everything inside libpurple, that's the library underneath the Pidgin UI, would just use the BSD socket API. And then on Windows, we had this monstrosity that would intercept syscalls and look for the networking ones for the socket stuff and then reroute it to WinSock. Right? If this sounds really gross and hacky, that's because it is, or it was. But nowadays we just use gsocket for everything because gsocket transparently does all that, right? gsocket has an API that's abstracted and just does the right thing depending on your platform, and you're good to go. So that's just one of those examples, right? Like that didn't exist at the time, so we came up with a hacky example. Likewise with the TLS stuff, we also supported Mozilla's NSS. I forget what it stands for. It's probably like Netscape Secure Sockets or something. But we supported that as well as GNU TLS because there were some things NSS did better than GNU TLS, and some Linux distros would ship one but not the other and stuff like that, right? Remember, game goes all the way back to 1998. I've been working on this project for 20 years now. A lot has changed in those 20 years. And distros shipping both of them is not a big deal anymore. But that said, GNU TLS has, I don't think it's gotten to feature parity with NSS, but it's more than adequate for our needs, right? But more importantly, it integrates into the platform-specific CA store, including Windows. And I think Mac might be a little different, but whatever, it integrates with those, so we don't have to care. Right, the libraries we use do it, and we don't have to care anymore. Whereas in the past, nobody did it, so we have to do it, right? Which is kind of where we are with a bunch of other libraries. Like, the whole reason we wrote HASL is because everything else is really old code and not fun to use. So, yeah. All right, if there aren't any more questions, we're gonna finish up here. I'll give you guys a second, but I think we're about done. So, closing notes. Did I have any specific closing? I think we covered everything. Basically, you know, after my, I guess we'll call it vacation, we're still going to be pushing hard on Pidgin. I was really hoping we would have the alpha out by Pidgin's 25th birthday. The 25th birthday is November 18th. This project turns 25 years old. I want to do something to celebrate that. I currently don't have any good ideas. If anybody has any good ideas, please feel free to reach out to me. You can hit me up on Mastodon, Twitter, whatever. I'll drop a link to all my socials right here. Or you can just join us on the Pidgin Discord as well and, you know, talk about it there. We've thrown around the idea of maybe like having a stream with other Pidgin developers, former Pidgin developers, stuff like that. But I don't know how well that will go, but maybe we can do something like that. I don't know. Right. But if anybody has any ideas, by all means, please let us know. But yeah, we're gonna keep trucking on, trying to get everything going and finished. and we'll see what happens, right? This is a story I tell sometimes, but so when I lobbied to become the lead developer back in 2015, because remember I took over in January of 2016, I said I'll probably do this for a year or two, and then there's other things I'd like to do rather than be the lead developer of Pidgin. And here we are 7.5 years later, and we still haven't reached my goal of getting 3.0 out in a year. That said, I don't think we've wasted time. Yeah, it would have been great to have released Pidgin 3 right away, but the examples I try to give to people are, does anybody remember the KDE 4 launch? And how everybody was like, oh my God, this is horrible. KDE's never going to come back from this, blah, 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 right? That's what would happen to us right now if we released Pidgin 3. Because it's not in a releasable state. And the features it has suck, right? And I don't mean that to offend any developers or any of their work or anything, but it's just the truth, right? Like, the biggest thing is one of the reasons why we can't update Pidgin 2 to do anything useful nowadays is because every single useful thing, like replies, reactions, threads, redactions, that's editing and deleting messages, etc., all of that depends on a message being addressable after it's been delivered to the UI. We don't have that in Pidgin 2. Because back in the day, you couldn't edit AIM messages, you couldn't add a reaction to a message, you couldn't delete a message, you couldn't do this on IRC, MSN, Yahoo, AIM, Silk, whatever, pick one, right? So there was never any need for it, right? And by trying to overhaul all of that in the API and make that compatible and stuff like that, it could be possible to do it in Pidgin 2, but you're still stuck on GTK 2. You're still stuck on a real crappy build environment for Windows, and you're just sitting on tons and tons of deprecated code, right? So instead, we're taking our time to handle these things and do these things right in libpurple 3 in its development cycle, so that we don't have this problem again in the future. So as we're doing this, we're realizing that lots of our APIs were busted by design. I didn't want to say that, but I'm trying to think of a nicer way to say it. And there's just, it's really hard to let that code sit and fester as you're cleaning up all the other code, right? And sure, we could do it, and we are doing it with certain things right now. Like the file transfer code is an absolute nightmare. There's been a lot of work put in to clean it up and at least get it to gsocket, and with more of GIO for handling data streams and stuff like that. But the main core API is still really gross and sucks. So we're going to keep fighting the good fight, trying to get through and get the stuff all up to date so that we can, again, be a big player in universal chat, because from what I see on social media, people are definitely looking for the solution that we previously provided. Now we just, need to get everything into a good working state and, get the product, get Pidgin released so that everybody can use it. So yeah. All right, and I think that's everything then. Yeah. So until next time, remember the next State of the Bird is scheduled for October, is tentatively scheduled for October 27th. Be sure to watch the blog on the Pidgin website for when the State of the Bird is actually going to get announced with its real date and time. I meant to put it into Discourse, and I don't think I did, but we should be doing that again in the future too. So all right, with that, I hope everyone has a good rest of your day, evening, and I'll see you next time. Bye.